Thank you, Duncan, for those kind comments. No doubt I'll be joining the queue for a copy of that last presentation. Great. Information packed. Just want to say to start with that it's fantastic to see events like this happening in the regions. You know, that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, is that innovation does need to be something that is happening across Australia, and it needs to reflect the diversity of industries that exist not only in the big metro areas but also in the regions. Second of all, can I have a show of hands, the Telstra guys in the room? Because in every event I speak at, there are always Telstra guys. No hands? So I can say whatever I like and it's not going to get back. Great. A couple of years ago I got involved in a kind of running series of events, like a showcase going around the country talking to different companies and cities and communities about the things that Telstra does that most people are not aware of. We called it, I bet you didn't know Telstra did that. And the reality is, historically, we're not great at telling people the things that we do. Everybody knows that we do Big Pond, everybody knows we have a big focus on our network, and those kinds of things will continue to be the case. But the reality for Telstra is that, especially in the last 10 years, we've increasingly started to focus on all of the things that the network enables. And certainly this is an area that is an example of that. Oh, you gave me the wrong remote. That's better. So this is an area where there is a lot of buzz. That's just some of the articles in the last few months that have included Telstra and are about this topic. I guess for us it's important to think about the UAV space and the UAV opportunity in context of the broader direction that industry and their technology are headed. And so for us, we think about this in context of the Internet of Things, which is really about an increasingly connected world where we have all kinds of opportunities to deliver benefit, be they financial benefit, be they sustainability related benefits, be they social engagement related benefits, by connecting people, processes, data and things. And if you use that as a little template and you think about your own organisations, the Internet of Things is going to enable a lot of benefit to flow, both to yourselves and to those that you serve. And in this connected world, there is really nothing that is not going to be connected. And each individual thing that gets connected can deliver a level of value, whether that be the shirt on your back, whether that be the coffee machine down at the coffee shop, whether that be your car. We're doing a lot of stuff with connected car, with Tesla and now with Toyota as well. The reality is that in a world like that, there are multiple layers of benefit. There's not only the benefit of having the individual thing connected, but it's then having the ability for that individually connected thing to integrate and to communicate to other connected things. And really, when you start thinking about that, the sky's the limit. Most importantly for us, we know that even change itself is changing, and in a world where there is this much technological change happening at the pace that it is happening at, there is disruption. And we've got to think through that. Terry spoke about some of those kinds of considerations. And so for us, we want to make sure that we're embracing technology, but we're, as far as possible, doing it in a way that mitigates the negative impact of disruption. And in fact, standing in front of you at an event like this is one of the ways that we want to do that. We want to educate and we want to empower people around the country with an understanding of what's coming, what's just over the horizon, so that you can get involved, so that you can be a stakeholder in the conversation, and so that you can be an early adopter, because that's where the benefits will derive from, and that is the group of people that will most be able to leverage the benefits and mitigate some of the negative consequences. We are living in what many are calling the fourth industrial revolution. And if you look back and do a little bit of reading about previous industrial revolutions, there are times when there are massive positive advances, but they are also times when things can go off the rails and there can be sectors in cities and communities around the country that can be immensely disadvantaged. So just sharing with you the way that we're thinking about this space in context of all of the other things that we see from the privileged position that we have. One of the things that's really important, and I'll share with you kind of how this affects us, but then push back to you to get you thinking, is that in a world where there's convergence between the physical world and the informational world, you can't think in a binary fashion. For us, in the cities and communities space, we can't think about ICT. We have to also think about sociology and anthropology. We have to also think about urban planning and design. We have to also think about engineering and construction. That's a tough thing to do, because we're not a sociology company. We're not really an urban planning company. But for us to play effectively in that space, we need to learn to think with those other lenses. So pushing that back to you, each in the businesses and the organisations that you're involved in. If you're a farmer, you can't just think like a farmer. If you're a building contractor, you can't just think like a building contractor. You have to start exposing yourself to other lenses, to other ways of thinking, so that you have a broader view from which you can respond to all of this convergence that is happening. And as I hinted a couple of minutes ago, there is kind of a value stack here. It's one thing to think about the immediate benefit you could have from a UAV delivering a package. But when you start thinking about the fact that there are layers of benefit beyond the core service value, which I've called it up there on the left-hand side, to the benefit of now having that UAV being able to be connected to other sensors and devices, whether they be monitoring pollution or water quality, whether they be monitoring traffic, whether they be monitoring noise, whether they be CCTV systems for public safety. When you start to think about the opportunities to move from the core service value to the compound service value, which is the blended value of those two connected sets of technology being able to talk together, you start to see a whole nother layer of benefit. And then on top of that, when you look at the data that comes back from everything in this connected world, and the ability to actually interrogate that data and build up correlations between different pieces of information that you may not even have realised have a relationship, and then be able to make predictive and prescriptive recommendations on things that you could do to plan ahead to avoid problems before they happen. And then taking all of that technology up the top and extending that out to the operation, so that the operation becomes one that is about evidence-based decision-making. And then finally, extending that out to people. Because one of the things that is driving all of this change is the aspirations and expectations of people. You only have to sit and listen to your annoying children, like I do, to see that they're fundamentally different to us. They have totally different ways of thinking things through, and they're growing up with a totally different set of expectations. And so it's very important that whatever you do, that you consider that final step in the journey, which is, how do I take what this technology can deliver, and more specifically, the information I can get from it, to deliver specific ongoing value to my clients, clients, in cities and communities context, to citizens, ratepayers, constituents. Telstra obviously has a growing and significant current deployment of UAVs. And it's a technology that we're constantly looking at new areas in our business that we could leverage. Currently, we have a team of guys going around the country really enhancing the way that we manage the mobile tower assets that we have. And we've got nearly 8,500 of them. So that's a fairly significant task, and there's a lot of benefit that we can derive from that capability, from those guys using that platform as a tool, really just another tool to be able to do those kinds of things, to enhance maintenance and maintenance checking. We're required to, for example, monitor when there are certain species of birds that are nesting in them, and other applications, including doing line of sight checking to try to improve and enhance and optimise the propagation of radio signal on our network. But that's really just the start. What we're looking at here is proliferation. And a lot of the detailed stuff that Terry spoke about are the things that we're thinking about. We don't think that this UAV technology is really going to be viable unless we can find ways to make it easier to use on a larger scale. And we know we've got a key role to play in that. In terms of our network, there are a lot of current areas of thought, and many of them align with what we will be planning to do in the UAV space. Key considerations like providing quality of service. The way the technology currently works is not perfectly suited to the kind of requirement that we know is going to be required in some of these new emerging spaces like UAVs. 5G testing and trialling is happening as we speak. We have a team of guys in Sweden with Ericsson helping to define the standard. And the reason that we do that is because ever since 2G, we know that we have some unique requirements down here. And if we don't proactively get on a plane and go over there and influence and shape the standard, what happens is we have to inevitably try to fix up the gaps that exist once it gets deployed. The first trial of 5G, active trial, will be happening in early 2018 at the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast. So it is a strong area of emphasis for us, and certainly the adjacencies and connections between UAV and 5G is obviously something we're investing significant time in. I'll give you an example of some of the kind of capability which actually was publicly announced at our annual Vantage. Is there anybody here who went to that? Anybody? One? Yeah, great. Was it good? Good conference? So we have an annual expo where we kind of invite customers and suppliers and partners, and it was all of last week down in Melbourne, and we publicly announced what we're doing with this area, which is a technology set called lanes. And lanes is really the ability, as Terry was kind of saying, to take the spectrum and to split it up into individual lanes that can be dedicated to certain tasks based on the priority of those tasks. Now, the context of our initial launch of that technology is disaster management, so that we don't have situations where when there is a disaster, we're stuck with the inability to make sure that the emergency services operators have the bandwidth that they need to be able to perform the tasks that they need to perform, because there's a bunch of people on Facebook. But that same core capability of taking that network and splitting it up into lanes and being able to deliver different levels of priority to different applications is exactly the kind of technology that we know is going to have to be required. So there's a couple of videos on YouTube on lanes that you can watch. And then, as Terry indicated, cells on wings. Right? The ability to supplement mobile coverage with connected UAVs flying around. We're already getting requests for those kinds of initiatives in the disaster management space and in large event type arenas, but we know that there's a broader opportunity to look at that as well. Finally, and I guess this is an important message back to you as well, we have a ventures and a mergers and acquisitions part of the business that, because we want to be keeping pace with technology, is constantly looking at companies to acquire and invest in. That's just some of the companies around the globe that we've invested in the last 12 months. And many of those companies are not in spaces where you would think that Telstra is involved. So if there is innovation happening, we are very keen to talk to people who are innovating. And it's amazing, in fact, just before this, I was hearing about a couple of companies that are operating in Dalby that are actually global players. And it's such a common story going into regional Australia and finding these companies doing really innovative things, sometimes on a global scale, and we're not even aware of it. So these are the kinds of things that Telstra is also wanting to look at, is investing in innovative people in technology, including this space. Because we're thinking of the UAV as a platform to gather data, fundamentally that's what it's about, which means that it's well above the actual task that it's doing. That's an initial layer of benefit, but it's a lot more than that to us. we are looking at all kinds of approaches to collecting data while that UAV is up in the sky doing what it is doing. What other information, not just video information, but other kinds of sensing data could we be collecting from that in terms of a payload? And then feeding that into the analytics. We really think that the majority of the benefit that is going to come from this new era of technological advancement will be in the area of advanced analytics as it relates to information. If you think about your day and your week and your month, you spend a lot of time fighting fires because something went wrong and you didn't know it was going to go wrong. Potentially we can live in a world where a lot of that gets taken away, because if we can get real-time information from connected assets, infrastructure, vehicles, UAVs, clothing, whatever else, we can know that something is going to go wrong before it does. That will be an immense benefit to you on an individual level, in terms of your family, in terms of your businesses, your organisations, and in terms of the broader economy. We think that UAVs are going to play an important role in terms of safety and even things like lighting. So those are some of the things we're thinking about. Certainly video analytics is an area that we've invested strongly in. The ability for a system to look at live video and intelligently interpret that video and make decisions. So the last time that you got off of a plane in one of the big metro areas and you walked out to the baggage carousel and you walked past the little gates that you feel like they're going to cut you in half, did you notice there's nobody standing there? And 5 or 6 years ago, there used to be a guy standing there. And the reason for that is because there is now a CCTV system with video analytics capability that is smart enough to know if somebody walks up there. The reason they used to have somebody standing there was because that was one of the weak points in an airport. If you just walked up there, you could get into the bowels of the airport. Don't need a person to do that anymore. Virtual reality, we think, holds a lot of potential. If you think about something as basic as Outlook, I don't know about you, but I get way too many emails every day. And one of the frustrating things about Outlook is that I've got to go and read every email before I make a decision as to whether it's actually relevant, whether I should have been copied. And I can tell you more than half the time, the answer is no. So we think that in a connected world, we're going to have different ways of providing user interfaces to people, to allow people to quickly assess what's important and respond to that in things like smart city and community control rooms, but even in your own organisations. So virtual reality is important, and if we can have a fleet of UAVs with cameras, with internet connectivity, constantly taking that visual data and comparing it to a virtual reality model, you will never have the equivalent situation of when in the old days you had your little GPS navman unit and they'd built a road since the last time you bothered to do a software update, and all of a sudden the thing didn't know where it was going. So we think that that's potentially a good opportunity for this technology. Feeding all of that data and capability into platforms to be able to enable you to rapidly make decisions. You know, the old analogy, if you think about traffic lights, if instead of a red, orange, green, they had an LED sign with text on it telling you whether you should stop or not, that probably wouldn't work very well. And that's because we are visual and we respond best to these kinds of coloured graphical interfaces. So we think that's an important area that UAVs can contribute to. In terms of smart cities, we think that UAVs hold the potential to provide a low-cost, rapid response capability, not just in disaster management, but when some piece of data comes back telling you that there's something not right, that could be a chemical that's been dumped in a river, it could be some other pollutant. Within a few seconds, you can have that data back, and you could, in a low-cost fashion, you could redirect UAVs that are performing a task close to that area to go and take a closer look, to capture a license plate, to measure some other air quality, to inform your decision-making. We're doing a lot of stuff with connected car, and just incidentally, when we interviewed people under the age of 13, 7% of people aspired to own a car. So driverless cars are definitely going to happen because people don't really want to own them. But in terms of connected car, there's interesting scenario that could emerge, and that is pairing UAVs with other kinds of vehicles. We think there are a lot of opportunities for a UAV to not only benefit from the ability to auto-recharge by being attached to the vehicle, but also by being able to fly ahead of the vehicle and provide insight and information ahead of the operators and the crew that might be going out to perform a task. All kinds of scenarios like that. And then we think that this, like many other technologies, is an opportunity to create innovation in cities and communities. So we're talking to councils and we're talking to other organisations about smart labs and hubs where people who have an aspiration to innovate and to get access to data that they could be provided with to solve city and community challenges that are unique to areas like this, we think that these kinds of technologies play a role there in fostering the increased adoption of just innovative thinking. And I guess the future. I mean, who knows where this could go? But the reality is, as I was saying to a room full of professors at one of the unis a couple of weeks ago, innovation is about people. It's not actually about technology. It's about all of you. It's about whether you're willing to wake up in the morning and look at yourself in the mirror and be prepared to disrupt yourself. Because in a world of disruption, those people who are willing and able to push themselves to disrupt the things that they've done in the past will be the people who will be able to latch on to benefit from and to make a difference with these kinds of technologies. So thank you.